of everything written about why most athletes fail after retirement, the most important context keeps getting dropped from the main narrative. I watched 34-year-old Marcus retire from the NFL last spring, and during the press conference where he choked up promising to give back, I noticed something nobody else seemed to. His hands were trembling, not from nerves, but because every single finger joint ached in the cold, air-conditioned room. That's the first thing that hits you when you peel back the curtain on retirement. The body doesn't stop reminding athletes they're mortal the instant the spotlight turns off. The second thing is even quieter. While the network cut to a slow-motion highlight reel, Marcus's wife, seated behind him, was texting their financial advisor. Not about a foundation or a jersey retirement, about whether the lump sum payout would cover the private school tuition for the two kids who've never lived without a nanny on the team's dime. That's the invisible crater most retirement conversations ignore, the quiet collision between identity and income. What's happening right now is we're seeing a slow-motion wave of ex-athletes in their late 20s and 30s crashing into a world that feels like a hostile takeover of their nervous system. The NFL alone has over 1,200 alumni under 40 who filed for bankruptcy within 15 years of hanging up their cleats. I've talked to enough of them to know this story isn't just about money, it's about rhythm. The daily cadence of practice, film study, travel, rehab, game day adrenaline, it's a metronome most humans never experience, and when the beat stops, the body starts screaming. You'll hear guys say, "I don't know who I am anymore," but what they really mean is, my calendar is now a blank void, and my nervous system hasn't gotten the memo it's allowed to relax. The ones who thrive are the ones who replace that cadence with something else that feels just as relentless. Coaching, broadcasting, investing, even coaching their own kids' teams on Saturday mornings, because the athlete's engine doesn't run on willpower, it runs on externally imposed structure. The momentum is growing, not because athletes are suddenly fragile, but because the blunt truth is surfacing. The skills that made them elite in sport are now liabilities off the field. The same hyper-focus that turns a receiver into a human GPS becomes tunnel vision that misses red flags in a business deal. The relentless competitiveness that fuels a third-quarter comeback turns into a zero-sum mindset that sabotages friendships when another dad at the playground casually mentions his startup just raised a round. And the refusal to quit, what analysts call mental toughness, can calcify into stubbornness that keeps them locked in bad contracts or dead-end partnerships long after the market has moved on. I sat with a former point guard who sank $1 million into a gym franchise during year 2 of retirement. The business folded by year 4, and his marriage was on life support because he couldn't admit he no longer had leverage over anything except his own stubbornness. What saves the outliers isn't talent. It's the willingness to trade their identity for a new operating system. Take Marshawn Lynch. Within 18 months of his first retirement from the NFL, he launched a successful cannabis brand, invested early in a Seattle-based meal delivery startup that later sold, and built a reputation as one of the most astute operators in athlete venture circles. When I asked how he pivoted so fast, he didn't mention vision boards or motivation. He said, "I stopped waiting for life to give me a playbook and started using the same damn film study habits I used on Sundays. Every morning at 6, I watched 2 hours of pitch decks before my coffee turned cold. I made my new locker room my desk chair." That's the shift. From being the star to being the one who shows up early, stays late, and treats the rest of his life like a sport he's still trying to master. But here's what most highlight reels skip. Marshawn's off-field success started with a brutal 3-month detox. He wasn't just quitting football, he was quitting the daily dopamine hits of achievement. For the first time in his life, his body wasn't screaming, "Come back, come back," and his brain couldn't manufacture urgency the way it used to. Depression isn't the exception, it's the default for many athletes when the external scoreboard vanishes. I've sat with Olympic sprinters who described the first 6 weeks of retirement as a free fall into numbness, waking up to no alarm, no itinerary, no metric for how well they performed yesterday. The ones who climb out fastest are the ones who ritualize replacement metrics, mileage tracked, presentations rehearsed, classes audited, something that gives airtime to the same neural circuits that once lit up after a personal best. The real gap isn't willpower, it's infrastructure. Many retirement programs still operate like a corporate exit seminar. Here's the 401k slide deck, here's the alumni mixer, while the athlete's nervous system is still dialed into survival mode. The best programs I've seen pair every ex-athlete with a transition teammate, a former peer who's already 6 months into the unknown and who becomes the human metronome. They meet weekly, not to talk feelings, but to compare calendars, share sleepless nights, and hold each other accountable to showing up somewhere, anywhere, that replicates the gravitational pull of a locker room. It's the difference between listening to a podcast about reinvention and actually having a teammate call you at 6:30 a.m. to run through your quarterly investor pitch before the sun is up. I also see athletes who refuse to retire on paper, but slowly back away from the limelight, a phenomenon called soft retirement. Take a two-time All-Pro center who stepped out of the league, but kept a consulting contract with his old team. He works 20 hours a week, reviewing film, travels only for home games, and spends the rest of his time scouting youth football in underserved neighborhoods. His body still aches, but his mind isn't fractured. He's maintained a version of the cadence without the grind. The key isn't to abandon structure altogether, it's to choose structure that still feels like play. When the activity stops feeling like an obligation disguised as a passion, you know you've found the right replacement. Listen, the narrative that athletes fail after retirement usually points to money or fame. But the deeper failure is cultural. A society that worships the jersey number and forgets the human. The ex-players who thrive aren't the ones with the biggest Rolodex. They're the ones who give themselves permission to grieve the loss of their platform without equating self-worth to relevance. They start treating their own lives like a sport they're still coaching, measuring progress in small wins, adapting the playbook, and learning to trust the process even when the scoreboard stays blank. So what can you take away the next time you see an athlete in a press conference wiping away tears that feel heavier than the moment? Ask yourself, what cadence are they trying to replace? Who is their transition teammate? And where are they hiding the playbook they used to win games? Because that's the only playbook that